Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Friday night's Conversations with Kate. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad that you are with us, and I'm hoping that throughout our conversation tonight, you will join in the chat and send me questions that I can share with our amazing guest, none other than Canon James Buonemani, music director here at St. James, and organist and composer. And I'd just like to first of all say welcome, Jim.
Kate, I am so happy that you've asked me to do this. I'm really excited about tonight. I feel very honored. So it's great to be here, and let's get started.
All right. Well, the honor is mine. And I have to tell you that when I found out that I would have the blessing of getting to be the rector at St. James, the big thrill was the idea of working with you. So this is my idea of heaven.
That's an unusual thing for a rector to say. I'll tell you, I feel so blessed by that. Thank you so much for that.
Oh my goodness, it's true. And believe it or not, everybody, believe it or not, Jim has been at St. James for 25 years. I know he doesn't look old enough for that to be humanly possible, but it is. And so my first question to you is, what drew you to St. James in the first place? Because I think you're from way back east.
Yes, well, I was working at the Church of the Epiphany in Washington, D.C. in the mid-'80s and into the mid-'90s. And when I took that job, the rector at the time, a lovely man by the name of Edgar Romig, he's no longer with us, but he said that he would be retiring in 7 or 8 years. And so when that time came, and we had a wonderful ministry together. We had worked together so well. I thought, his ministry is now over. It might be a good time for me to look. And so in a practical way, it was through the organist journals. The American Organist is a magazine that every organist reads, and there was St. James listed in the classifieds. So it was as simple as that. Just looking for work.
It was all the way on the other side of the country. Did that give you pause?
No, that actually piqued my interest.
Oh, okay.
I always was attracted to California. There's something about the West Coast. I think a lot of Eastern Coast people feel that pull. And so I thought I would check it out. The only thing was, it was listed at the time as a 3/4 time position.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, well, I'm not sure if this will work, but I sent in my resume, and within a day, Kirk Smith, the rector at the time, who since became Bishop of Arizona, flew me down, and we had such a wonderful time together. We just clicked. And then, of course, it wasn't just him, but a fellow by the name of Michael Blakeney picked me up at the airport. He was a major sort of player in the church at that time, and his wife, Carolyn Green. And we all just felt like family from the very beginning.
Amazing.
And then Kirk said something to me that really piqued my interest. He said, Jim, I would really like for St. James and the city to become the St. Thomas, New York City, the St. Thomas Fifth Avenue. Those of you that know that church realize it's one of the top music and liturgical places in the world. It's just a wonderful place. So when he said that he wanted St. James to sort of approach that, and he held that up as a model, I thought, well, this is the place for me.
Oh my goodness.
So
that's wonderful. That was 25 years ago, and praise God, you're still here. So Kirk's not with us anymore. There have been all sorts of people who've come and gone. What has kept you wanting to be at St. James?
Well, first and foremost, it's the relationships that we've formed over these years. No question about that. There's so many people here that from the very beginning, I felt we were on the same page. People like John Thies and Cliff Challey and many others, they all expressed a real passion for liturgy and for ritual and for spirituality. And music, of course, was part of that experience. And so we were able to grow together. I've learned over these many years from these people.
Mhm.
And of course, beyond that, it became then the rich tapestry that
Mhm.
is St. James that has
Mhm.
kept me here. It's these
Yeah.
incredible relationships with so many people from all over the world, from so many
Mhm.
traditions, and yet music unifies us all.
Mhm.
And of course, we can talk later on a little bit about the
Mhm.
choir, which is the
Yeah,
special
there's that too, right?
that, and there's the magnificent organ and
But
the
let's talk about the organ though for now, because the organ, even though this year is the 25th anniversary of the organ, I think our organ is even older than that, isn't it?
Yes. So when I arrived, the organ was not in yet. And the organ originally dated from 1911, built by Murray M. Harris, an LA builder. And it was in St. Paul's Cathedral for most of its life, downtown LA. In the 70s, that cathedral was torn down due to earthquake damage. But luckily, through the efforts of a man that people should know, Manuel Rosales, primarily, saved that instrument. It was put into storage. And then about 15 years or so later, the organist here at St. James, my predecessor,
Mhm.
David John Falconer, realized that St. James needed either to fix its aging instrument or to get a new one.
Mhm.
And he knew Manuel, and through many conversations with many people, including, of course, Kirk Smith,
Mhm.
um, they decided that this would be the perfect fit for St. James. But I would have to say, for people who are interested, the history of this organ and how it came to be here and what it had to go through, it's a drama, an unbelievable drama, complete with, unfortunately, a murder
Mm.
story, very tragically, and also the death of one of the builders of the instrument.
So
For
your predecessor was murdered, right?
So David John Falconer, the organ is named in his honor. It's the David John Falconer Memorial Organ, because David was, after a choir rehearsal one Thursday evening, tragically murdered at a convenience store, robbery or something
Mhm.
like that. And so it was very tragic, and he never got to see the organ installed. But that is part of the story, and there's a lot more to the story for listeners. And go to great music. Well, go to our webpage, St.
Yeah.
James webpage, and click under great music. You'll see a tab that says organ. And there's a wonderful history of the entire instrument. And it's coming here to St. James, written by Manuel Rosales. And it does read like a murder mystery, and it's full of
But so
uh,
when you came, the choir must have been grieving. The congregation must have been grieving.
yeah. That's exactly right. And so when I came, I was really, one of the things I was charged to do was to basically be a kind of grief counselor for the choir,
Yeah.
because unfortunately it hadn't occurred yet. And so it was, the first couple of years were actually quite challenging.
Mhm.
I remember beginning rehearsals for a year or two with these wonderful vignettes from the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh.
Oh, I love him.
And I bought books for everyone. The name of the book is Peace is Every Step. I recommend it to a lot of people. And we would read a small vignette from that, and that calmed everyone down and brought everyone to the present moment, which was really needed because they were still existing in the moment.
Mhm.
Where's David? Where's our
Yeah.
choir master?
Oh, I can
So it was a
imagine.
year or so of
Hmm.
doing that kind of thing.
That's a sort of an unusual way to start to start your time in a place to come into trauma. But sounds like you did a really good job of helping them realign and recover. And now I want to just ask a question about your career because um, as a musician, it seems to me you could have gone in a secular direction or the sacred direction, especially with keyboard and I suppose even to organ. But what made you feel drawn to sacred music, to dedicate your life to sacred music?
Well, that really did happen as a very young child.
Mhm.
Even before I was exposed to music, and before I started studying music at, I guess I was age 7 or so, there was some, as I think back now, all these years later, I realized that I was kind of a weird kid in that
We
it,
were all weird. I think we were all weird
as
kids.
most church people are. And I vividly remember thinking, looking at nature or listening to music a little bit later, but mostly in the physical world around me. I would get up early and watch the sunrise and look at the clouds and ride my bike, and I would have this wonder that where do I fit into all of this? So it was a very spiritual sort of awakening at a very young age. And as far as I'm concerned, music and all of art, the whole purpose of music and art is to create a kind of vortex to the divine, to
Mm.
try and help you glimpse into that divine world, which is really inside you, which makes you
Mhm.
understand a little bit more about yourself. So I grew up 5 houses down from the Cathedral of the Sacred Heart in Rochester, New York.
Oh my
So that
goodness.
cathedral, and I went to the cathedral school as a youngster. So I remember distinctly at age 10 or so, going to the cathedral, and the organ was being put in. They were putting in a
Mhm.
new organ. And
Mhm.
I would see all these pipes laid out and see this magnificent thing being erected there and
Mhm.
finished there. And then it was the choir director at the time, William Ferris, a Chicago composer, musician. He became my first mentor. But listening to his music emanating from the balcony where the organ was, he had a men and boys choir at the time. I suddenly realized that, wow, music in the setting of liturgy, with the power of liturgy, the power of ritual, the power of the building, the art of the windows, all of those things came together, kind of
Mhm.
like in an opera. Only
Uh-huh.
this for me was real. This
Yeah.
wasn't an opera. This wasn't something
No.
put on at stage. This was a real living experience. And I thought, well, this is the best way to experience music. This is what it's all about. So never once did I leave that feeling that that's where I needed to belong. So I
Sounds
knew
like you
what
were really responding to the power that it all had to sort of get at meaning in a really big way. I could
exactly.
see as a kid that would just,
Yeah.
if you could take that in, that would be life changing, and it was, right?
It was, and I never wavered from that. I mean, I was one of the lucky people that never had to think, what will I do for
Mm.
the rest of my life? I knew from a very young age what I wanted to do and just stuck at it. And not that it's
Yeah.
always been easy, but it's been totally gratifying.
Well, but you do more than one thing in your work. So, I mean, you direct the music, you play the organ, you compose music. I'm getting so many questions in the chat, and they're wonderful. I want to first tell you just one cute thing that Jack Pitt said. He said when he first visited New York a couple of years ago and entered St. Thomas, he felt immediately like he was home.
Mm.
So it sounds like
Well,
that.
may I say,
Yeah.
I felt the same way, and I think people feel the same way at St. James. And it's not because of the music in particular, or the building, or the art. What it is you enter into this special space that is this vortex into the divine, and you feel you're coming home because it points you inward. Suddenly, something inside you resonates through this experience in that place, and it happens throughout the many churches. St. James is one of those special places. Actually, the
I
building
know.
seems to have that spiritual energy.
Well, let me tell you, when I was at St. James for my interview, you generously offered to take me into the church and let me hear the organ.
Yes, I
I
remember.
remember you were playing the organ, and I walked up and stood behind the altar, and I touched it, and it was warm. Now,
Mm,
how is that marble warm? I ask you. But
yeah.
it was just, it felt familiar. It felt home-like, and I kept thinking, how come this grand, incredible place with this soaring music, how can this also feel home-like? But I think it's that both and experience.
It grounds you immediately.
Hmm.
I very much believe in um, this spiritual energy, and I'm thinking of a wonderful favorite composer of mine, Gabriel Fauré. Many people are familiar with his Requiem. There's a moment in the Lux Aeterna near the end of the piece where suddenly, in the middle of this movement, there's the sopranos hold a C right in the middle of their range, very easy note to just sustain, and it's just sustained between a passage in one key, and it then enters another passage in a different key. So it modulates, but being held with this one note in between and nothing else. That to me is a vortex in that piece.
Oh, I got chills.
Yeah, because suddenly in that moment, it's like the universe opens up for you to glimpse.
Yeah.
And then it continues. The piece continues. Duruflé has a moment like that. And I think art in general, that's the purpose of art, is to try and open those glimpses.
I know there's a moment like that in your composition, "Oh Beauty Ever Ancient Ever New," for sure. It's one of those hinges, you know?
Yeah, a hinge.
Yeah.
That's another good word for it. Yes.
I love that. That's great. Here, let me just ask a few more questions. Well, somebody wants to know, growing up, was there something particular about the upstate New York beauty that spoke to you? Or is it just a relationship with nature sort of wherever you are?
Well, having grown up in New York State, there is something about any place that I suppose that you grow that you of course you're not. As a child, we used to vacation in the Adirondack Mountains, so
Oh yeah.
the beauty of that, I'm sure, did have an effect. There is something about the light and the air and so forth there, so I'm sure that that's true. But nevertheless, I love the tropics. I love California, the deserts, and no matter where I am, you see God's creation.
Yes.
And you can connect very easily with it.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, but it is true. It's sort of like your mother's cooking, though. There's something about that first
That's true.
that first world. Um, well, you talked about Fauré, and I'm just wondering, do you have a favorite composer of choral music?
Well, I guess my favorite composer is the one that we're singing this coming Sunday.
Really?
Well, what I mean by that is on any given Sunday,
Oh,
my favorite.
trying to think. Wait, who is it this Sunday?
Yeah. Well,
That's so
actually,
funny.
although this Sunday there is one that sort of particularly does resonate for me, and that's the English composer Herbert Howells.
Mhm.
But what I really mean is that whatever we're doing that particular week, that becomes my favorite, for that week. All these composers, again, they all are expressing the same thing,
Mhm.
this divine sort of element that you're trying to grasp. And they all do it in different ways, and you see it through different colored glasses.
Mhm.
Through Bach, it's through a very complex colored glass. Through Vaughan Williams, who I love, it's
Mm.
through this pastoral sort of English
Sweet.
haze. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't have a.
And then I don't know if it's common with other choirs, but I think you also are drawn to Nordic music.
Well, I would say just more or less recently, in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, I discovered that music because before the internet, that music was not well known. It wasn't published here in the United States.
Mhm.
The European markets, it was difficult to get that stuff. Only in the last maybe 10, maybe it's 15 years now. Time seems to be going by so quickly.
I know.
But suddenly we have access to Latvia and Lithuania,
Mhm.
and those are, of course, the Baltics. But then you get the more northern regions of Ola Yelo and some of these
Mhm.
others, even Sibelius and all of that. But of course, he was a very famous one from early on. And so I'm discovering these new creations, and it's a sound world
Mhm.
that really appeals.
Mhm.
And I would have to say, talking about sound world, here in LA, we have a very special sound world that was very much influenced by Morton Lauridsen. And I think many people will recognize that name.
Mm.
And may I just tell this very quick story that
Yeah.
when I first came here in 1995, my very
Yeah.
first Christmas here, the Pacific Chorale was giving a concert just sometime in early December. They wanted to give it here at St. James. And I said, great. And they wanted me to play the organ for it. And I said, great. Well, on that program, one of the pieces that they programmed was Morton Lauridsen's O Magnum Mysterium, fresh off the press.
Oh my gosh.
One of the earliest performances. And I listened to this piece, and I was sitting at the organ console just listening because I didn't have to play during that. Mm-hmm. And I was completely bowled over. And afterwards, Morton was there, and I got to meet him. And I didn't realize it, but his son was in my children's choir here at St. James.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing! You didn't know that you had his son in your choir.
The word the last name Lauridsen with yes, Lauridsen.
Oh my goodness!
So we became fast friends, and after that, I became the organ arranger for his Lux Aeterna piece, and we've collaborated a number of times on performances of that and other things. But that was a special thing.
That's very special, and I love actually Friends on our website right now is a beautiful evensong recording from is it the evensong where you sang Sure on the Shining Night, or was it the LACMA Sundays Live?
Yes, that was the LACMA Sundays Live concert on March the 1st.
Oh, right. And I don't know if that's living right now on our website or not. I'll find out. But I remember you sang Lauridsen.
Yeah, and you can go to KUSC and LACMA Sundays Live, and I think you can find it there.
Okay, so that's one of my favorites, Sure on this Shining Night. And when we were in Ireland last summer, the choir sang Ubi Caritas, which was beautiful and so well received. And that's another Lauridsen favorite. And every Lessons and Carols, right? You do.
The O Magnum has become a tradition. So every Lessons and Carols, we do that one. Mm-hmm. But we've done on multiple occasions is Lux Aeterna, both in the organ version and in the full orchestral version. And he's a very special guy. That's one of the great fulfilling things of coming here to St. James, getting to know him and getting to know
I'm sure it was. And I think he also maybe taught some of your choir members at USC.
Totally. Yes, yeah. I have many choir members that come from USC, particularly in the early years. That was the primary source, students at USC. Many of the people now in the choir are graduates of USC, and they've been with me since their student days. And that's very gratifying. But yes, they all, of course, have studied with Skip, Morton's Lauridsen. And it's a really a close sort of knit family with USC and St. James. And now LACMA.
And LACMA, I know, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I want to just share with you a question from Cliff Shalley, who says, Jim, years ago you wrote a Sanctus for St. James. Have you any thoughts of completing a Mass for St. James? So now we're talking to Jim Buonemani, the composer. We've skipped over from choir director to composer. Have you ever thought, this is a great question Cliff is asking, of doing a Mass?
Well, that is a great question, and Cliff has asked me that before, and I'll say that part of the reason is that the Sanctus that I wrote is a congregational Sanctus meant for the whole congregation to sing, and I dedicated it to Cliff and Kirby. Because they were such dear friends of mine, and were so important to the liturgical life of this place. We worked together so well. Fleshing that out to do another congregational setting, that's intriguing. I would say maybe. We'll see.
Well, I mean, if we're quarantined long enough, I think you'll have the time.
Well, that's the thing. Well, actually, I'll tell you, this quarantine time has kept me very busy with all of our online services. And
I know. I think it's if anybody thinks that we're just sitting around, we're not.
Well, speaking of composing, I'm one of these people that are not very prolific, because it takes a lot of time for me, and it takes dedicated time. I can't do it while I'm doing other church things. So when I compose, it's usually on sabbatical or during a summer vacation. So it's a very difficult and all-encompassing prospect for me. That's why I don't do that many, except for occasional pieces, short pieces, like the Sanctus. but that's not a full mass. I did do a full mass called the Missa Miamiensis already, and that was
Oh.
for the 150th anniversary of the Church of the Epiphany in Washington, D.C. And we've done some of that here. We've done the entire thing here on occasion, but it's a very long, involved thing. It's actually more of a concert piece than it is a liturgical piece.
Cliff is saying that he's excited that you're considering this. now you're getting pestered. No, I'm just kidding, Cliff. And then you wrote that beautiful Gaelic piece last summer for the Ireland tour. Remember?
Yes, two sort of Gaelic pieces. One is a short setting of a Gaelic prayer called "My Love,"
I love
which
that
I
one.
wrote for two choir members. One choir member that married another musician in town, and then the other piece is a Gaelic sort of a traditional hymn that the melody sort of stood all by itself, a very simple, beautiful Gaelic melody, and I fleshed it out. Basically, I didn't compose that one, but arranged it for choirs.
Beautiful.
And it was a lot of fun to do that. So short pieces are easy to do. It's the big long pieces that take an awful long time.
The short piece that you wrote for Andrea and Chris, what is it called again? My Love, right?
Yeah.
And that one's on the CD. It's an amazing, one of my favorites.
It is. And Andrea Zomarodian is one of our dear sopranos there, who I love and the whole choir loves. And Chris Kravis is now the music director at our cathedral, St. John's Cathedral. And it's been wonderful to be here for 25 years because I knew these people when they were just students, young students, and to see them grow and develop and to thrive and flourish in their work is just so fulfilling, so wonderful.
Absolutely. I have a question from a fairly new parishioner, and his name is Carl. He's wonderful. And he says, for those of us newer to both classical music and lyrics in other languages, what do you recommend for learning to worship authentically while in such unfamiliar territory?
To worship authentically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that what he means is if the music is part of your worship experience, but if it's in a language that you don't speak.
Well, I would like to answer it this way. And Carl, I don't know if you've ever been to a Compline service that we used to hold. Now, if you're very new, you have not been to one because this past season we did not do them because of the LACMA concerts that interfere with that time slot. But this principle is that we didn't expect even churched people to come to Compline, and it consisted mostly of Gregorian chant in Latin. Some of it was in English, but the idea was you come in and you participate authentically, passively though, by listening and allowing the music and the sounds to wash over you. And that can within you bubble up a spiritual awakening, very much like meditation. And that's what we try to get at through Compline. And so I would say the same thing. If you go into this church or any experience that seems foreign or difficult, don't try to figure it out. I would say just allow it to seep in. And if it connects with you, if it resonates with you, you've begun the process. And then to learn it and get deeper involved, well, there are classes, there are, all sorts of ways to learn what this language is all about.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
That's the same kind of thing for you too, right? When somebody asks you about Christianity or becoming an Episcopalian, you have to start somewhere.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think all the words make complete sense in the beginning, even though they're English. There's so many ideas and ancient traditions embedded in the words. And some of it can be certainly unpacked and better understood over time, but a lot of it remains mystery.
What is that phrase? The end part of the phrase is, when necessary, use words.
Oh, yeah.
The first part. But
yeah, that's
the idea.
attributed to St. Francis, right?
Right.
But yeah, he was saying, let your actions speak the gospel. And so in this case, we're sort of saying, let the beauty speak the gospel, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So I have some practical questions from friends. One person wants to know, understand the whole process of what's involved in installing an organ the size of ours, and somebody else wants to know if there's going to be another CD before too long. But I want to ask you. I hope to get to those questions, but I want to ask you just a few more of mine right now first. And one of them is, and this is kind of a controversial. I'll be honest. It's a little bit of a controversial question, but I think you can handle it. I remember someone saying to me when I first came to LA about St. James Choir, they said, "Oh, at St. James, the choir is the tail that wags the dog." And I remember thinking that sounded that sounded negative, and I thought, but what a tale, but I wonder about that perception and how you react to that, because I bet that's not the first time anybody ever said that.
No, that's actually a pretty common theme. And it's not meant as a compliment, unfortunately. Even
Unfortunately
though
is right. Yeah.
Yeah, my feelings about that are several. First of all, it's really important to realize that the music program in a church is just one of many parts of the church. And, St. Paul, I guess it's in Corinthians, says, there are many parts of the body, but one body, but made up of many parts. And that's what music is. If it's a strong part, I feel that helps the health of the other parts. And I really feel, and you can just look at the history and go across the country. You'll see any church that has a really strong music program, they're usually not failing churches. Number one, it's often people are attracted because of the music, but because of that, your food program, your feeding program will begin to flourish, or your teaching program, or your schooling program. So it's really part and parcel of something. Music, remember, is not something, I think, to be very honest with you, people that feel that the way that music is maybe taking over something, I think it comes from their own distrust, their own maybe sense of power struggles, or their sense, sometimes it's jealousy. I mean, let's face it, the church is made up of human beings, and we all have jealousies, and we all have these small-minded things. And I think every organist you talk to will have stories of where there was this competition almost between the minister, the rector, and the musician. But the thing is, and the wonderful thing, of course, I love about you, Kate, and I've loved about all of the rectors that I've served with here at St. James and even in Washington and before, is that we all realize, oh, whatever is good for you is also good for me. We are in this together. And of course, St. Paul says, build each other up.
Yes.
Tear down. So that would be my response.
I completely agree. And I would just add that there's nothing in the world that's more delightful than working with other people who are absolutely in love with what they do and completely sort of dropped into the experience of what they're doing, And so a music program, which is prayer, right? That's extraordinary. Just seems like pure blessing to me. Yeah.
Well, that's, what largely keeps me here at St. James is
Mhm.
because there are so many people that
Mhm.
are passionate about this same thing.
Yes.
And it keeps us all working together in this beautiful um, synergy
Hmm.
of building up the kingdom of God through whatever means we have at our disposal.
Yes.
Now, I would say in some cases, there are there are certainly musicians who are in it for themselves and for their self glory.
Mm.
And if the music program is really about performing and about them, getting up there and just displaying their talents, if it's about
Mm.
that, then yes, that
Mm.
is not proper and that's wrong, and that does happen. Same
Mm.
thing though with preachers.
Yes.
So we are human. We can be guilty of that, and that is the time that we all need to be brought, back into the fold. Here, I don't feel that. I don't think at St. James we've experienced that kind of thing. We've
Mm-mm.
been very
Mm-mm.
fortunate and a wonderful place to work.
Yes, I agree. A wonderful place to work. And I think when everybody's able to surrender themselves to the work at hand, it's
It's not about us.
it's not about us.
A wonderful person that we had here as rector for a number of years, Paul Kovalevsky, used to say all the time, over and over, it's all about relationships. It's
Mm.
all about relationships. And if you are in a good, solid relationship with someone, you're not going to feel that you're going to rejoice in their success,
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
And it works both ways. So it is all about relationships,
Yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. And helping and helping all the people who come into this world of St. James to find those experiences of the divine and of meaning that we've been talking about, those vortex moments.
That is our purpose here.
Yes. Hey, we've gotten a message from Megan and Marley Malone Franklin.
Oh,
And I think they're speaking to Carl in a way. They're saying for people who are a bit more on the left brain side of things and newer to music in languages besides English, studying the translations of the texts can be helpful too.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. Like
I,
I have to do
Hardly-
that with opera. I mean, I can't.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's a very
Um,
practical suggestion.
that's a
Thank
practical
you, David
suggestion.
Marley.
That's right. And Tom Abbott says music is such a prayerful experience. And Jack says that the music program reaffirms my belief that beauty is real and in the world from God. The outside world doesn't always affirm that.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I
Speaking of which, we are in now this time of COVID-19. And I'm wondering, how is that affecting your experience of being the St. James music director and organist?
Mm.
We mentioned a minute ago we're busy, but how is it affecting you? I mean, as the leader of the choir and all
Well,
of
going a little deeper, I do find that uh, much like when I first came here in 1995,
yes.
we're going to experience a period of grief again. We're already in that period of grief and a sense of loss.
Mm.
And the loss is not making music together. This family unit that we've built up over many, many years suddenly finds itself not being able to connect through the joy of making music together or just hanging out together, which we do at rehearsals, a lot. And so we're going to have to deal with that. I am actually very nervous, not for the long term. Music and church music is going to survive in the long term beautifully. There's not going to be a problem. But we have to be very strong to be able to get through. Is it 6 months? Is it a year? Is it a year and 2 years where we may not have the full choir on hand at every service? We may
Mm.
not be able to keep social distance if we have to maintain that with our full choir. This is going to be difficult. It's going to be a big challenge. So I do worry about that. And but the joy is seeing the choir very much rallying together. We have our Zoom happy hours, most Thursday nights.
Yes, I don't know if people know that the choir is staying together in that way.
And Pentecost Sunday, May 31st, we've got this wonderful virtual choir project that we are working on, so that you'll see all of these faces singing a beautiful anthem for that day. And so there are ways to stay connected, and we have to learn more of that, how to continue our music ministry, our ability to make music together through this time, to get us through this time, and then we'll be fine.
Yes, ultimately we'll be fine.
Yeah.
And tell me, how do you feel about your choir?
Oh my! No,
I mean, what are the metaphors? Do you feel like a parent? Do you feel like a friend? Do you feel like a teacher? What is the relationship?
oh gosh. Well, of course, it has varied over time. Certainly in the very beginning, I told you about having to be sort of a grief counselor and all of that. As I get older, I'm feeling more about like being the daddy figure, especially when we go on tours together. But I have to say, I am so blessed, so richly rewarded, because I have a choir not only of superb musicians. I mean, they sing, outstandingly well. And many of them are first-rate professional musicians, and I'm learning from them all the time. I mean, I go into rehearsals sometimes not knowing half the stuff that they already know.
Really?
And
I don't know if I believe that.
Well, I believe it.
All right.
But beyond that, the more important thing is that these are really wonderful people. When people audition for this choir, it's not just about how good they are musically. It's about how will they fit in with the spirit of the group. And it's no secret that part of our choir is professional. We have some paid people, and part of it is volunteer. But I'm very proud of the fact that all of these elements are never divisive, that we really do consider ourselves a family, and the volunteers learn from the paid people. And I think the paid people also learn what it's like to struggle with learning music. And that helps them in their teaching and in their perspective of teaching music and learning music and approaching music in a different way. So we learn from each other. We certainly have grown together beautifully. I love my choir.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that some of them are paid, but I don't know that much about the music world, but I can't imagine that they get up every Sunday morning for them. I mean, to stay in a choir for years, as many of them do, and to be so committed to it, it can't be a job.
Well, I think that's generally very, very true. I think people come here, especially as you say, for many years because they love being with these other people. And I think for many of them, of course, they've come into the church not being Christian or not being certainly Episcopalian, and have learned to love the liturgy and love the church and the teachings and the sermons and the preaching. Our choir listens to you, Kate, preach.
They do.
Listen hard. And they listen to all of our rectors. And they only tune out if the preaching's not any good, and that doesn't happen here. I mean, that never happens. So,
well, that never happens.
but many of them do become parishioners over the years.
Yeah, and I'm always standing by to baptize anybody. Megan says definitely feels more like a joy than a job, and Lorraine says. Lorraine's here. She says, being in the St. James Choir was to me the gift of a lifetime.
Oh, dear Lorraine. Well, Lorraine was from many years ago. She moved away probably 20 years ago or so, close to that.
In Nevada now, right?
She now lives in Nevada and is a lot closer, so she'll be coming down, I hope, to see us more often. But she was our tour guide for a number of years. I mean, putting together some of our earliest tours of England.
That's right.
And she's a wonderful support all of these many, many, many years. Glad you're watching and listening, Lorraine.
I know, Lorraine. And I told you that little 2.5-year-old Benjamin
Yeah.
is on the call tonight.
Our future Dudamel.
Yeah, our junior Dudamel. And his mom says the music program at St. James has inspired our little Benjamin, 2.5, musically. He now watches symphonic performances while eating and loves the organ during church on live stream.
That is just amazing. You have a very special child there. I really think that he's going to be a Dudamel type. I really do.
He's going to be a Buonemani.
I want to add one thing that sparked something in me because he's so young, 2.5, and he's being affected in such a positive way. I would say regarding the choir, one of the most fulfilling aspects of my job has been not only with this choir, but previous choirs as well, is when some of these young, particularly the young student types that enter the choir, they will take up a career in church music. And I've had many of them go to my alma maters to study music and have become very successful church musicians or other kinds of musicians as well. But to know that I have affected them in a positive way where their entire career and their lives have been turned in a direction of music and of art, that is one of the most fulfilling things that I would have to say about a 50-year career that I've experienced.
Well, it's got to be. And it's fulfilling for them, I know. I mean, I think that all over LA and the world, there are people who've been affected by being in this choir. And by the way, Benjamin's mom says, thank you, Jim. So the youngest protege here.
That's wonderful.
I am wondering if there's anything. Oh, I know there was one little question. This came from Father John Fuse. He wants to know who's your favorite composer of organ music.
Oh, well, other than Bach, you mean?
All right. Well, yeah.
Bach has to be the paramount composer of organ music. I mean, there's just no comparison. And if there is another favorite, it would be tossed between Duruflé. Love Duruflé's music, but Bach, hands down.
We have these once a month organ concerts here at St. James. This the International Laureate Series.
Right, International Laureates Organ Recital Series, which was started the year that the organ was put in. So that we are celebrating this coming season, 25 years of that.
I didn't realize that it had been going on that long.
Yes, 25 years of the organ itself, and 30 years for LACMA Sundays Live, because LACMA took it over 30 years ago. So this next season is going to be a big one, and I just hope that this pandemic recedes by then.
I do too.
We're planning to go forward, and we're planning as if everything's going to be normal. I think that's the way to do it. And then if it's not normal, we adjust.
Adjust, yeah. Right. Well, there's so much more that we could talk about, but I'm going to just end with a quote from Megan Malone Franklin, who says, "I've said it before, I learned more from my first year with Jim than I learned in my music degree. Such artistry."
Oh, Megan, I love you. Thank you. That's a great compliment, and I'm not sure that I can really come up to that standard, but I'm glad she thinks so.
And I can say from my point of view, there's just nothing more fun than working with you. Your enthusiasm and your excellence and all of it, it makes the work just sort of transcendingly meaningful. And I'm so lucky.
Well, ditto, Kate. Working with you has been such a joy. And working with Megan and my choir members, such a joy. But I have to say, you're the first rector that has wanted to really hear my story and has talked to me on this level. Well, I guess online interviews this is something we can be thankful for the pandemic, right?
Right.
Never happened.
There are silver linings.
Yeah, that's right.
You are a silver lining, yes.
Joy to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tonight. Thank you.
My
and
pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget that you can hear Canon Buonemani play the organ every Sunday at our 10:30 live stream service, and there are other recordings on the website that you can listen to.
And with Tom Mueller, our wonderful associate
Yeah.
organist, Dr. Tom Mueller. You'll hear him
Yes.
every Sunday as well. And what a joy it is for me to work with him.
Oh my gosh, yes. And
Great.
he actually said something at the very beginning, and I didn't get a chance to tell you, which was he said he's a college professor.
He certainly is.
He said we use Falconer's curriculum. So David Falconer, he was the predecessor to Jim. We use Falconer's curriculum for teaching sight singing at Concordia College to this day. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, Falconer wrote a Kadai. Well, he used the Kadai method and did some work with for his doctorate in preparing a kind of pedagogical method. So that's a delight. I didn't realize that.
I know, isn't that interesting? Anyway, thank you for that, Tom Mueller, and thank you for being the assistant organist, associate organist at St. James. And Jim, thank you again for tonight. It was such fun talking with you.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Blessings, everyone. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you next Friday night when I'm speaking with Catalina Huang, who is an amazing leader of our Korean language congregation, and she's going to talk to us about the Korean experience at St. James. So good night for now. Bye, everyone.